In most games, players can interact with the environment, but making that feel smooth and consistent isn't as simple as it sounds. For example, when a player approaches an object, we want an outline to highlight it, along with some text that explains the action they can take. The key is to avoid coding this behavior separately for every object. Instead, we need a modular component-based system that's both flexible and reusable. In this tutorial, I show you how to build a simple yet powerful interaction system, complete with outlines and interaction text, all designed to be robust and easy to expand for any project. In Unity, I have already prepared a few things. We have a cat that can walk around the room. I have made a simple movement script for this. Nothing that we have to talk about in detail. I also have made a simple script in which we can turn on the TV. I mean, it's obvious that the TV is the most important part here and every cat loves TV. So let's create our system. First, we will need an interface. We create it in the interfaces folder and call it interactable. It will have a few methods that all our interactable objects will need. We first need to make sure that it is a mono behavior or at least can return a transform. Then we will have a display name, the name that we want to show to the player when he or she is in range. Next, we need a bool in which we check if we can interact with interactable and also a method interact that will be called when we interact with it. We also will have two methods for when we gain or lose focus on the interactable. That's it for the interface. We then create a components folder. Inside, we create the interactable component. This is the component that we will place on all interactable objects. It will be a mono behavior, but will also implement our interactable interface, which will create a few methods for us. We will need some fields as serialized fields so that we can set them in the inspector. An important one is the Unity event here. This will be the action that we want to perform when we interact with this object. This way we can just plug the action in the inspector and can always use the same script for interactables. We also have to make sure to fulfill our interface contract, so let's return the display name and is enabled here. The interact method will just invoke our Unity event. Then for the outline we will use a free Unity asset, Quick Outline. We could create it ourselves, but why should we when there are so many great assets out there? I like this one because it's simple to use and has all the functionality we need. But the great thing about our interaction system is that it's so modular that you only have to change a few lines to use another outline asset if you want. When you have added it to your project, you can return to the interactable code. Here we have to add a private outline reference to the script. We don't have to add the outline to each object because we will do this here in Wake. In Wake we will also set the outline up and disable it then so that it starts disabled. In the onFocusGained method we then can enable the outline again. In onFocusLost we disable it. This component is ready to use now. In the scene, we now can add this component to our TV, for example. Here we then can also connect our TV script's toggle method to the Unity event of the interactable component. Before we can interact, we need another script, the player interactor script, which we will add to our cat. This script will also be a mono behavior. First, we will have serialized fields for a radius and the layers that we want to be able to interact with. Then we will have a buffer. This will contain all the objects around us and will be assigned in the update. Last, we need the interactable focus, which will be the object that we are currently focusing. In update, we first need to get the nearest interactable object. We do this with another method. Inside this method, we first use the overlap sphere method to get all objects around us, and we add it to the buffer. Then we create the nearest object, which will be null at first, and also save the nearest distance, which at first will be max value. Inside a for loop, we then go through each collider that is not null and try to get an interactable that we can interact with. If we have one, we can check if its distance to the player is smaller than our currently nearest. If it is, we can set it as the nearest interactable. We do this until we have the nearest and then return it. Back in the update, we can then update our focus with another method. This method will compare if the new one is not equal to the current and will then change the focus. In update, we also want to check for the E key. If it gets pressed and we can interact with the interactable, we want to interact with it. Now back in Unity, let's add another interactable to, for example, the scratching post. We don't need to assign the Unity event for testing purpose. This way, there will be no action when we interact. You can now see that we can focus objects when we get near them. And we can also interact with them. But the game doesn't tell us what we can do with those objects. For this, we will need a last thing, the interact prompt UI. We will use UI for this because this way we can make sure that the text is always on top of everything. First, we create a new canvas. Under the canvas, we create an empty game object and call it interact prompt. And under this, we can create a text mesh pro. We can style it a bit. In the canvas, we forgot to set the scale mode to scale with screen size and set the reference resolution. Now let's create our last script, the interact prompt script. This will also be a mono behavior and will have 3 serialized fields: the label text, the world offset, which we can use when we want to offset the prompt element, and a string for the key. Then we need a few other private references as well. In the awake method, we get all the references and call the hide method because we want the prompt to start hidden. The show and hide method will be called to show and to hide the prompt. In the hide method, we just disable the text and set target to null. In show, we get an interactable, and if it's not null, we can set the target to the interactable's transform and set the label text. We also enable the label. Now in late update, we need to make sure that the UI is always at the object's world position, for which we will have a few calculations here. Now in Unity, we can attach our new component to the interact prompt object and set all the variables. In the play interactor script, we have to add a small thing. We need to reference the interact prompt there, and we also change the update focus method so that we actually enable and disable the prompt when needed. Now in play mode, you can see that the cat can walk to all our interactables and will get a hint which will tell us the action of the interactable. Perfect. That's it for this video. Now you have a simple but modular interaction system for your game. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you liked this video, please subscribe or leave a like. It helps me a lot. Thank you for watching and see you next time.